What's going on, everybody, and welcome to this segment of Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm your host, Robbie Yeager. And so I usually upload a segment of every live stream that I do, or I will be doing so going forward, but I tend to do that. And for some reason or another, yesterday's video file of the live stream that I did got corrupted. And instead of just moving on, I still wanted to re-record this segment because I feel like it's important, at least for, you guys, especially for anybody that's on the progressive left, anybody that supports the Sunrise Movement and tends to tout them as some kind of bastion for progressive activism. There's an issue with them, and I've been covering them for a while now, and the issue just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is the fact that not only are they a dark money group, Sunrise Movement, they are technically that, and I'll explain what that is actually in a second, because there's lots of misconceptions around that. But they keep taking exponentially larger checks from at first billionaires, and now one of the largest dark money outfits in the country, the 1630 Fund, has given the Sunrise Movement's PAC $500,000 in July, which is actually their PAC's largest donor this entire cycle. So it's a pretty big deal, especially for, since you're not going to hear about this anywhere except for here, because MCSC, especially, here, me, myself, Niko House, Combo Couch, we're the only ones that are actually going to talk about this, because nobody else, no other progressive indie YouTuber or journalist so far has taken the time to actually talk about this with their much larger audiences than I have. And I think it's important considering the popularity of Sunrise Movement and the way that they like to walk around acting like they're something that they're not. So before we get into the details of what Sunrise Movement did, let's take a quick moment and kind of clear up the misconceptions that a lot of people have about what dark money actually is. Just like there's a big confusion usually around the difference between PACs and SuperPACs. There's also a big confusion between dark money and SuperPACs. And to be quite honest with you, the SuperPAC can exist without the other. They are not necessarily the same thing. I would say this, though, that SuperPACs are the most common vehicle for dark money to get into our elections. So dark money normally originates from two places. One of them would be a corporation, right? Donating in the name of a corporation and not an individual. Say you have a super PAC, which allows corporations to donate unlimited sums of money to them. You could just say, hey, this super PAC got a donation of $1 million from Coca-Cola or Exxon or Walmart or whoever. And the fact of the matter is that that's as far as they have to go. You can just tell you it's from Walmart. Well, no matter what people like to tell you, entities like Walmart are not people, right? Somebody, Walmart didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to write a check. Somebody consciously made that decision, right? Somebody opened up the bank account. Somebody, sat down with people and decided to make this donation. Somebody wrote the check. Somebody sent the check. And hiding behind just the brand of Walmart to make that decision, it takes away all the individual accountability from the person or the people in some cases that are basically making the decisions. Now, that's actually the least common version of dark money. The most common version that you are going to see about dark money is going to be in the form of nonprofits. Specifically 501c4s. There's lots of different 501c organizations. The two biggest ones you're going to see is the 501c3, which does have some level of accountability when it comes to reporting of their donors and the amounts of donations. And then there's the 501c4 that basically has zero accountability. They do not have to disclose the names of their donors, and they don't have to disclose the amounts of their donors. That is what Sunrise Movement is. For those that didn't know, they are a 501c4. And there are lots of other great examples of this. America Votes, Center for Popular Democracy Action, Indivisible Action, Center for American Progress has a 501c4 as well. There's tons of them, right? Um, the 501c4 part of the nonprofit industrial complex, as I like to call it, basically allows, you know, billionaires, corporations, whomever, other nonprofits a lot of the times as well, make massive donations to other nonprofits, um, without any kind of fear of disclosure or any kind of financial repercussions. And I'll tell you why I think it's such a huge deal, near the end of the video. But we're going to keep going with what Sunrise Movement has been doing, right? So, at first, Sunrise Movement in its first year, it raised like 900 grand between its 501c4 and its 501c3, because a lot of these organizations also have both. Like, think of it like the White House, for example. There's a West Wing, there's an East Wing. They all do, they function under the same building, but they all have different functions themselves. And a lot of these organizations have a C3, a C4, and they might also have a PAC or a SuperPAC as well, all under the same umbrella. So Sunrise Movement started off raising like $1 million in their first year. And then in their second year, they jumped up to like, 2018, they jumped up to maybe they raised like $4 million between the two branches of them. And their C3 has kind of just gone by the wayside, and now they usually just use their C4, their main Sunrise Movement, organization, and their PAC, obviously, which we'll get to here in a sec. So, there wasn't a lot of, I can tell you that they pretty much did start off with a little bit of seed money from Sierra Club. They got a little help from a few other foundations, but it wasn't enough for people to really think it was a big deal. Right. I always thought it was kind of weird because they claim to be so grassroots, and maybe at first they were to an extent. But now there can be no doubt, because what we're seeing going through their PAC is just completely outrageous. At first, back in April, they accepted a $250,000 donation from George Soros's personal super PAC. And I know, ooh, George Soros, you're going to get into the boogeyman. No. This has very specific problems when it comes to environmentalists as well. So 250 grand from George Soros's personally funded super PAC. And that's called Democracy PAC. So then they just spend the whole primaries bashing other candidates like, Pete Buttigieg and, Kamala, and just about who else, anybody that wasn't Bernie, about, corporate donations, billionaire donations, stuff like that. And yet here they go, as soon as Bernie's dropped out, 2 weeks, mind you, 2 weeks after the formation of the Bernie Biden task forces, right, which they were a part of, they're taking 250 grand from George Soros's personal super PAC. I saw that coming eventually. Now, how did I see that coming? Because back in 2019, Sunrise Movement Executive Director Varshini Prakash went to the Democracy Alliance spring conference and spoke up on stage, had a little, a speech right next to Democracy Alliance President Gara LaMarche. That's a pretty big deal. Now, what did they talk about? Nobody knows, because you and I aren't allowed to get in there. It is a very hush-hush confidential place. And the only reason we know that anybody was there in the first place is because Washington Free Beacon has a source or a leak at Democracy Alliance that gives them, some of the paperwork and the pamphlets that lets us know who actually attends these things. It's the who's of Democratic Party, like Neera Tandon's of the world, Nancy Pelosi's, of the world, and lots of billionaire donors like the George Soroses of the world, because this is kind of his brainchild. So fast forward, after Bernie drops out, they join the task force. 2 weeks later, I report, and it was me that reported it because nobody else wants to touch Sunrise Movement, I guess. I don't know why, but I report they took $250,000 from George Soros's personal super PAC. Apparently, only a few people thought that was a big deal. That wasn't enough for people to cover it. So since nobody covered it, nobody tried to hold them accountable, the problem got worse. So again, here I am breaking a story that nobody else will talk about. No other lefty, progressive, indie YouTuber / journalist will talk about. And that is that since nobody held Sunrise Movement accountable, they also found it acceptable to up the ante and take $500,000 from an organization called the 1630 Fund. Now, before I go any further, let me just say I have been accused of like doctoring FEC documents and like faking shit, or people won't believe me because my name's not Kyle Kalinske or my name isn't Ryan Grimm, and I'm not mainstream. Which, hey, I've been trying to get their attention to get them to talk about this, but they don't really want to, or I guess they've got other more important fish to fry. But be that as it may, I'm going to show you the receipt. All right, before we go any further, here's the FTC website. You notice over here, I've got Sunrise PAC under recipient, right? That's Sunrise Movement's PAC. And there it is. You see it right here. 1630 Fund, July 9th, 2020, $500,000. And of course, right below it, you see the Democracy PAC, right? 250 grand. Now, in case you wanted to know exactly, just to show you what Democracy PAC is, I've also got that pulled up for you. See? And look who he is. Yep, there's our buddy George. 5 million, all this. And then you see this Fund for Policy Reform as yet another dark money group started out of the Open Society network of nonprofits that George Soros runs. They're 501c4, and they don't disclose any of their donations. And they donate, what's that, 15, 10, 30, $41 million. I'm sorry, $47 million, $46 million from this dark money group. And then they take that money and then they donate it to Sunrise. And they donate it to Priorities USA. And they donate it to David Brock's American Bridge. And they donate it to all of these super PACs who will take it. And that's what it turns out, that Sunrise Movement is just turning into just a run-of-the-mill super PAC, because that's what they're doing now. They're taking money from any and everyone. Now, 1630 Fund, who funds them? This is going to get confusing, and I'm going to try to make it just as simple as I can. The 1630 Fund is a project, and this is from an article that I wrote about actually the 1630 Fund last month, when they dropped $11.5 million into pro-Biden super PACs like Priorities USA, American Bridge, and Unite the Country, the three largest ones. $11.5 million in dark money fueling these pro-Biden super PACs. All these commercials you're seeing, you get inundated with ads every time you get on the computer, every time you turn on your television. Only a small percentage of those are actually paid for by that candidate's campaign. Usually, those ads, by and large, are paid for by super PACs. And, a lot of that's funded by billionaires, right? And a lot of it's funded by dark money groups, such as 1630. So there is a nonprofit consultancy group led by a former Clinton operative named Eric Kessler. The name of that group is called Arabella Advisors. Now, simply put, they have 4 nonprofits. They have one of those is the 1630 Fund. That's their dark money group. That's the 501c4. The other 3 are 501c3s. And we're only going to talk about one of them, and that's called the New Venture Fund. So the New Venture Fund is kind of like the paymaster for all of those nonprofits. They kind of foot the payroll bill and everything. A lot of the stuff goes through them. So in 2018, 1630 raised $143 million. Now, why such the old year? Why the old numbers? Well, because nonprofits don't have to file their taxes on the same date that you and I do. They get like a 6-month extension. And so it's like November by the time they even file. And then you have to wait for the IRS to load the information, which takes like another 6 to 8 months. So 2019 numbers hopefully will be available soon, but they're just not right at the moment. But in 2018, and this is just an example of how convoluted and crazy these organizations and these nonprofits get with one another, and how fucking crazy the dark money cycle gets. 1630 raised $143 million in 2018, right? Politico found out that an anonymous contributor gave almost $51 million of that 143. There's no way to know exactly who that is because, of course, 1630 doesn't disclose their donors. Now, Politico has a source, obviously, somewhere in there that was able to tell them, hey, somebody did give X amount, but they wouldn't tell them who. But I can go ahead and tell you right now that there might be many, many billionaires in this country, but there are only a handful of politically active billionaires that will give $50 million to a nonprofit like this. Okay. I'm gonna let you take your guesses on who that probably is, but it probably is who you think it is. Okay. Now that was 50 of that 143 million came from that one anonymous contributor. 50 million now. It's a lot of freaking money. Another 26 million came from the New Venture Fund, which of course, as we know now, is 1630's sister nonprofit, right? So at least we can trace some of that money. Now, the New Venture Fund, who funds that? Well, also older numbers, because that's actually the newest numbers that we have is 2018. They took in $405 million that year. 78% of that came from other nonprofits. So it's just a big cycle of money laundering, essentially, with zero accountability. But we do know that 25% of that 405 million in 2018 that was given to the New Venture Fund came from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations. That's equivalent to $81 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That likely makes them the New Venture Fund's largest donor, either individual or institutional. So, that being said, Bill and Melinda Gates take 81 million. They gave it to the New Venture Fund. New Venture Fund takes 26 million of that, wrapped up in all this other anonymous money, and then they give it to the 1630 Fund. And then 1630 Fund wraps that up in another big giant ball of anonymous dark billionaire organizational money, and then they give it to SuperPACs, who put ad after ad after ad on your computer, on your television, on your radios, your Spotify, everything, to influence your elections. This is the problem with dark money. We also know 1630 also received other support from the Tide Center, from Democracy Alliances, as we've talked about them, the anonymous billionaire group, Democracy Alliance's State Engagement Fund, which is yet another dark money group, and the Intercept funder Pierre Omidyar's Democracy Fund, which is his nonprofit, has also donated to the 1630 Fund. So, it's just there is so many people and so many groups that you wouldn't think just throwing their money in a pot. The problem dark money basically says is that you can donate all you want. You can donate your $5. You can donate $2,000. You can donate the maximum $2,800 to a politician if you really feel that strongly, or if you just got it like that. But it doesn't matter, because dark money is how, a very small cluster, a very small handful of billionaires influence the election by getting around, all of the, by getting around all the loopholes with donations, and, by getting around all of that, it's easy for them because they just throw money at the problem. And me and you can't do that. But George Soros can take $50 million and throw it at a super PAC. And now that super PAC's going to just basically play the ads he wants it to play. Because if he didn't want it to play that, then he wouldn't have put that investment into the super PAC. Super PACs are basically an unfair advantage for the elite oligarchy class. That's the best way I know how to put it. And dark money is how they make these things work on a grand scale. Like most people, if they donate politically, they're donating to a candidate. They're not usually donating to a super PAC. I mean, to their, as much as I can't stand them, the Lincoln Project is another prominent super PAC out right now, and they get tons of small donations. That's a fact. They do get some millionaires, but they get lots of small donations. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, these super PACs like Priorities USA and, American Bridge, they're funded by billionaires. They're funded by dark money groups. These are institutional names I'm talking about. You wouldn't necessarily put Sunrise Movement in that category up until now. But now Sunrise Movement have become exactly what they've always railed against. They're just another billionaire funded dark money group. Because guys, these numbers we're pulling are just from their PAC. All right. This has nothing to say about, who is actually funding their organization. Because remember, like I said in the beginning, the PAC is just a part of the organization. It's just a wing. There are several other pieces of the whole. We don't know who's funding that because Sunrise won't tell us. And you know what's even funnier right now? Is because of the fact that they're still denying it. They're still denying that they're a dark money group. As much as I can't stand Richard Neal, representative that's in a tight race right now, he's 100% on the money because he comes out and calls them a dark money group. If I can get it to stop buffering. This is what he said during a press conference just a few days ago.
They're supporting his candidacy. It's called dark money.
We'll play that again.
Pieces of legislation. And I think the better answer is perhaps the mayor knows who's sponsoring these ads. They're supporting his candidacy. It's called dark money.
And what does Sunrise Movement do? Even after they've taken this $500,000 from the 1630 fund, which is, on the FEC website for God and everybody to see. What do they say? They make a joke out of it. You heard it here first. At Rep. Richard Neal thinks we're a dark money group. You are. You're 100% a dark money group. That's not even up for discussion. Stop lying. Stop lying. You guys played ball with the Biden administration and the Biden campaign, and now look at you. You're sitting pretty, getting massive six-figure donations from billionaires and dark money groups. And you know what? Like I said, I hope Richard Neal gets voted out. But that doesn't make him any less correct about what he says. Sunrise Movement is a liar. And they're influencing on a grand scale. And not only that, but they're getting so many prominent lefty, progressive YouTubers and journalists to cape for them on Twitter and on social media. And, they just wind up looking stupid when Sunrise Movement does this stuff. And now they're in a position to where they either have to cover it and, basically denounce their backing for the group, or they're just going to ignore it, which is what they've been doing. But I don't want to ignore it because it's bullshit, really, when they still won't just admit. Even back during the primaries, Pete Buttigieg correctly said that there was a bunch of dark money groups endorsing Bernie Sanders, with Sunrise Movement being one of them. There was no lie in what he said, but they wouldn't admit it. This was before the Soros money. This was before the 1630 money. But still, he was correct about that even back then. And then now, not only have they proven him 100% correct and proven us all correct, but they've doubled down and still just won't admit to the fact that they are what they are. Because if they did, it would ruin their entire image as some upstart, grassroots, progressive movement. They're none of that. They are a dark money, billionaire-funded AstroTurf movement that are preying on the fears of a rightfully concerned youth. And it's not right. They need to just come out and say what they are and just admit to it. Because the whole climate change task force was a total joke. And, even after they got nothing accomplished, they came out and tried to tell you how big of a win it was. And then Varshini Prakash, again, Sunrise Movement's executive director, is on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman talking about, after Biden's elected, we'll be sure to be able to push him left. No, the hell you won't. How is that how do you even think that is possible, considering you gave up all of your leverage? All he wanted from you was the endorsement. The endorsement was the currency for a group. That's the currency that Biden wanted. He wanted your endorsement. He didn't make you any promises whatsoever. He didn't give you any assurances that you could then later hold him accountable for. He basically told you, give me your endorsement and we'll talk about it after the election. And you know what? After the election, he's not going to have any time for you because, you know, he already got what he wanted from you. You know, so look, you know, this is an issue that we need to be aware of, is that this group that, you know, the prominent left-wing candidates or progressive candidates, I should say, the prominent, you know, progressive YouTubers, journalists hold in such high regard, and, you know, even, you know, on the activist level are held in high regards. They're not what they say they are. The money proves it. They're proving it right in front of you. So just be aware. $500,000 from the same dark money group that is funding super PACs like Priorities USA. What is setting you apart other than your rhetoric? I mean, look, they're not who they say they are. Just know that. Thanks, guys, for watching this segment of Uncontrolled Opposition. You know, we like to try to broadcast free live on YouTube Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays around 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you miss a stream, then fear not. You can go to rockfin.com, sign up to be a premium member by endorsing me or maybe Niko, but me. You probably endorse me. That'd be better. But no, seriously, go to rockfin.com if you want to see the full episodes after they're taken down after the live stream. And you can watch all of my content, all of Niko's, all of Convo Couch, and, you know, anybody else that's on the Rockfin platform, not just MCSC. And that means Slow News Day, Jimmy Dore, you know, and a whole bunch of other great stuff. So thanks again for tuning in. You know, I'm always trying to do better, but until the next time I see you, you keep doing what you do, and I'll keep doing what I do. Take it easy.